what kind of bizarre imagery is conjured in your head when you hear the word detox? You might think of some unhealthy, malnourished-looking, crazy, skinny hippies embarking on juice fasts and detox cleanses, parasite cleanses, and drinking concoctions of bitter-tasting herbs, and just obsessing over making their body all clean and pure from all these imaginary toxins. And of course, as a result of their efforts, they just become sicker and more skinny and weak, and they don't admit this to anybody. All the people around them can see what's happening, but of course they don't listen to reason. So the word detox in some ways has effectively been destroyed because that tends to be its connotation. But the concept of detoxification is very important for the body, which has thousands of processes to detox, not just endogenous waste. Endogenous is a fancy word for created in the body. So all your cellular process and metabolism, even if you're eating a perfectly clean diet and live in a absolutely pure environment, your body's still creating its own waste that needs to be detoxified. But aside from that, you have your environmental toxins, things that you breathe in, off-gassing from various manufacturing processes and chemicals. You have microplastics, and then everything in your diet, which anytime you see weird chemical names added as food ingredients, that's something that your liver and kidneys have to work extra to get rid of in most cases. In most cases, those things are toxic, and even some things that certain people like the Rockefellers and the Weston A. Price Foundation have convinced us we need lots of, when ancestrally we did not eat lots of such things. So I'm going to focus more on the nutritional aspect in this video, or in other words, the oral aspect, things that we're actually consuming and digesting, and how the body has to process that. Because it's a very good idea to have a basic understanding of how those systems work, and most people have literally no idea, or they maybe know something about it. Certainly the people that know the least about it are the ones who are teaching detox courses, or doing detox health coaching for $60 an hour, and they teach you to take milk thistle pills and do these cleanses and eat this meme diet, and usually the result is that they don't really help you detox. So on to the basics. Y'all have heard me talk a lot about things like vitamin A and copper. So the risk is that you focus too much on specific substances that you're consuming in toxic amounts, or have accumulated in your body in toxic amounts, and miss kind of the forest for the trees, or miss the big picture, which is how it all works. And then you'll realize it's not about vitamin A, it's about a bunch of things, and it's about how we approach the subject, and the importance of very basic things like soluble fiber. So basically a long time ago, right, just to establish some lineage here, there is a researcher, Anthony Mawson, and he did some research. Let me Google him and see if, yes, first thing that comes up, National Institutes of Health, liver damage and exposure to toxic concentrations of vitamin A, Anthony R. Mawson. So gout and vitamin A intoxication, is there a connection? Anthony R. Mawson, M.A., Assistant Research Professor, Departments of blah, blah, blah. So there's a bunch of stuff. Now, he did a lot of early research, and I don't know the dates of these. Let me see when he was doing this research. Apparently, he did a bunch of studies on vitamin A toxicity from normal intake of vitamin A in foods, like not even taking supplements or whatever necessarily, although there were studies on that as well. So this is recent, more recent than I thought. Yeah, in 2021. He published liver damage and exposure to toxic concentration of endogenous retinoids. That means vitamin A created in the body, right? In the pathogenesis of I can't say this on YouTube, disease. That disease that everyone supposedly got in 2021. Yeah, so this is actually a study on that. And how when you had that certain disease that I can't say, people their bodies would be producing endogenous retinoids in very high amounts in toxic concentrations. Or when you say producing, the body wasn't making them. They were already there. They were just being dumped. That's all that was happening, right? So, I'm not going to read the whole study. That's just one example. And this gout study looks like this was published in. Science Direct is making me fill out a CAPTCHA to verify that I'm a human. Yeah, so this was published in. Oh, come on, give me... Yeah, 1991. Yeah, so a lot of his research was actually a long time ago. And then it just kind of sat there, and no one really put two and two together, right? All his vitamin A research and information on the liver and cholestasis, which is basically bile leaking into the blood, full of toxins, of course, and then along came several other people. So we had this lady named Karen Hurd, and I think she did something called the Bean Protocol, or something like that. I'm gonna find her website here. I should have had these web pages already loaded when I started the video, but I can't find anything on her website. I don't understand. Maybe if I search her with the word bean, I'll find something. Yeah, so there's a question. What is the Karen Hurd Bean Diet, Bean Protocol? It's a protocol designed by Karen Hurd that helps the liver detox and heal from a range of ailments. Why would the beans help the liver detox, right? It has to do with soluble fiber, but we'll get to that later on. So yeah, she's involved. She somehow figured out that soluble fiber in beans is going to absorb bile in the small intestine and help get it out of the body. And that's really important. And so after her came this other guy, or was it before or after? I don't really know. All I know is there's another guy, and if I go to ggenereux.blog, so GGENEREUX.blog, then he has 3 free ebooks on his blog. And the first one, which I highly recommend you read, is called Extinguishing the Fires of Hell. Right? And he was almost dying of chronic kidney disease, and he had horrible, like, psoriasis, eczema type thing. His skin was basically destroying itself and falling off, and he reversed all of that. And as you may know, if you've listened to me talk about this before, he followed a protocol, a diet that he just figured it out himself because he's an engineer and he's really smart. And he ate a diet consisting of mostly beef and bison, brown rice, white rice, and beans. And so he was consuming almost no vitamin A whatsoever and almost no copper. And those were the 2 main things. But like I said, it's not about specifically that. It's about understanding how this all works and why this all works. And that's why I'm establishing, Anthony Mawson did a bunch of this research. There is a whole lot of other research, not just his. And then Karen Hurd developed a protocol that kind of works based on that understanding, and Grant Genereux he was on death's door. His doctor told him, get your affairs in order, and he somehow just reversed it all. And now he's doing way better. And then, of course, this other guy comes along. His name is Dr. Garrett Smith, and let's see if I can go to his website, nutritiondetective.com. And yeah, he has a free course, The Madness of Modern Nutrition, which I would recommend you take. It is written, it's like a very simple course. It's for anyone can understand it, right? And it just gives you the very basics of some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So you can understand how nutrition works, how nutrition has been so co-opted, and even the things that people learn from, like, the Weston A. Price Foundation, which they think are like traditional learning about how the traditional people lived and the natural diet, and it's really appealing. But it's still based on a lot of foundational errors that the Rockefellers made on purpose when they were funding nutritional science on the first things they studied, like vitamin A and things like that. So they do a really good job at, like, having well-intentioned people pushing propaganda that pushes things that aren't really that good for you. They push a lot of good stuff, but then they throw in a bunch of stuff in there that's not helpful. So I'm on the Garrett Smith's website, nutritiondetective.com, and it says research-based vitamin A toxicity, detoxification, and liver health. And there's all this stuff on there. So anyways, just to sort of establish that lineage, who has been studying and developing this, Dr. Smith certainly has the greatest body of work out there, with, like, lots and lots of different live streams linking to dozens of different studies. Linking to, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different studies he has found on the subject of vitamin A and copper and similar types of things. So he's done, like, the heaviest amount of research into this. But let's get into the basics. How does your body do things, right? What happens to food when you eat it? A lot of people think, okay, well, I eat the food and it goes into my stomach, and then it goes into my small intestine, and somehow the nutrients get absorbed, and somehow the bad stuff stays in there, and then it goes into my large intestine. Whatever's left, I poop it out, right? And it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? It turns out the body's not actually that good at just absorbing the nutrients and leaving the bad stuff, whether it's the food additives or rather it's the things that are naturally in food that are still bad for you that you might be eating unnaturally large amounts of, like the vast majority of the 400,000 year history of Homo sapiens and the 1 million year history of hominid species that consume mostly red meat. They never really ate large amounts of eggs or dairy products, just because those things weren't available in the wild. And just in the last, when was the domestication of the chicken, right? That happened about 8,000 years ago in Asia, right? And it started 8,000 years ago in Asia, right? I don't know when they started having them in Europe. And then, so what about dairy cow domestication? As you know, dairy cows nowadays produce way more dairy than they ever did a long time ago, which means dairy is cheaper than it ever was, which means it says cattle were first domesticated from wild aurochs approximately 10,500 years ago, right after the Younger Dryas. And so we have these things that just happened very recently. We've only had really a few thousand years to adapt, and only 100 years to adapt to very high consumption of those things, because only in the last 100 years have we bred these animals to produce way more eggs and way more dairy products than we used to. So it just so happens that these things contain substances. For example, egg yolks contain a high concentration of retinol, and as does dairy products, retinoic acid, and they just happen to be things that are not so good for our livers. So of course, people that are going very heavy on those things because the Weston A. Price Foundation tells them to, they're not really following an ancestral diet, right? They're following a meme diet, and they don't think they are. They think they're following tradition, but that tradition is not really that old. And let me just search like a history of milk production per cow or something. I don't know how best to find this. The amount of milk produced per cow in the United States has increased each year since 1999. Just in the last 24 years, it's increased from 17,000 pounds per year to around 24,000 pounds. Expected to increase another 0.3 thousand pounds of milk per cow. So basically, they're just constantly breeding these animals, especially over the last 100 years when they started getting industrial about it, to produce way more milk and eggs, which means more production, which means they're cheaper, which means inflation adjusted. They're just cheaper and more available. People can eat way more of them than they ever used to. Just to give you an idea of how what you think is a traditional diet was probably not the traditional diet 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and definitely wasn't 10,000 years ago when you're considering these things. So anyways, back to the basics. You eat your food, and so the carnivore diet followers like to talk about plant toxins. So when I mention toxins that are naturally present in foods that you think are good for you and that you're eating more of than your ancestors ever did, right? That's why I went off on that tangent. So plants, one of the toxins contained in plants are called carotenoids, and people say, well, carotenoids are antioxidants, they're good for you. And as Dr. Garrett Smith loves to point out, they've done multiple studies on beta-carotene supplementation in which they had to stop 2 of them because too many people in the studies were dying, right? So carotenoids are... The antioxidant thing is kind of a scam because most of the body's detoxification process are actually oxidative. But anyways, ignoring all that, you are having plants that have toxins. You have animals that consume them and concentrate them in certain areas of their body, like their liver. They'll excrete them in, for example, the egg yolk. For example, people don't realize that mammals do exude toxins in their breast milk. It's just yet another way to get rid of toxins. Once the baby is born, the organism, yes, does want to keep the baby alive, but it also wants to keep itself alive, right? So anyways, plants have the toxins, and they may be concentrated in certain ways, so that's why we're eating food. Even if we eat a completely what we think is a natural diet, we still may be consuming high amounts of plant toxins that are concentrated in certain things. And so what happens to that, the body's not so good at just leaving them in there. It absorbs whatever it can, in your small intestine, right? So how does that food actually get absorbed in your small intestine, and where does it go? Well, let's look at this first thing that I have pulled up here. What is this article? Portal vein. Yeah, so I searched portal vein on a search engine, right? And what does this say? It says, what is the function of your portal vein? Your portal vein is a blood vessel that carries blood from the many organs in your abdomen to your liver. Your liver filters and processes this blood before it returns to your heart and recirculates through your body. Usually, veins carry blood towards your heart rather than to other organs. So the portal vein is a unique vein that there's a network of tiny veins that are all throughout your small intestines, and stuff gets absorbed, substances get absorbed through the walls of your small intestines into these tiny little veins that network together and eventually all join the portal vein, which eventually goes to your liver, right? And your liver is going to do this thing where it's going to take what's good for the body and allow it to be transported into your bloodstream, and what's bad for the body it's going to try to take out. And what does it do with this? Well, it puts it into the bile. And so your liver is constantly producing bile. I think I was looking at an image of the biliary system. So your liver is going to be putting some bile into the gallbladder, right, where it gets stored and then released at intervals. But it also has a direct bile duct directly into the small intestine. And the pancreas, which is right next door, also has the pancreatic duct, which is connected to the same system. And so the pancreas is actually creating enzymes and putting it into your small intestine to help you digest food. The liver, for some reason, is putting bile directly into your small intestine, but mostly the liver is putting bile into the gallbladder, which has a bunch of it, and then it can dump it when it's triggered. And there's a number of events that can trigger a bile dump. And one of the things that can happen when you get a bile dump, specifically if you are a toxic person, you have a lot of toxicity in your body, you might feel itchy, or more so, you might just feel like crap, right? Because it just dumped a bunch of bile acid, which, like I said, might contain a lot of toxins. If you're a toxic person, a lot of stuff that's in your liver that's accumulating from all the crap that you've eaten throughout your life, it's getting dumped into your small intestine, and then it's getting absorbed into your blood. Eventually, it can make its way into your bloodstream, because the liver can't take everything out. And when the liver is really not functioning well, you get something called cholestasis. You have leaky bile ducts, you have a leaky liver, and some of that bile makes its way into your blood, right? So especially if you, some of the events that can trigger a bile dump, in other words, your gallbladder releasing a bunch of bile into your small intestine, are, for example, exercise, right? People who don't like to exercise, maybe they really feel like crap when they start to exercise, because when they start to exercise, they dump bile, and they don't feel good. And hey, what also tends to happen when you dump bile, sometimes it triggers the urge to defecate. So coffee is particularly toxic, and surprise, surprise, a lot of people, when they drink a cup of coffee, they have to poop right afterwards, right? And because one of the things, when you start to drink your coffee in the morning, it can trigger the caffeine, which is quite toxic, can trigger a bile dump, because consuming a toxic substance will also trigger a bile dump. So trigger a bile dump, and the bile, of course, being dumped into your small intestine is a trigger for elimination. So maybe you're gonna want to go to the bathroom right after that. So anyways, other things are like sitting in the sun for a long time and sweating, that can trigger a bile dump. Consumption of fat, really consumption of any food can trigger it, but especially consumption of fat, because you're going to need to release bile acids to help break down the fat. So when you eat a diet high in fat, you're just constantly going to be dumping bile, and you're going to feel like crap eventually. Eventually. So all the bile acid in there, and it's nice to have something to help absorb it and carry it through the small intestine, which is where soluble fiber comes into play. Now, let's look at a couple other... I'm going to read off some other interesting things regarding this. All right, intestinal reabsorption, an overview. Does the colon reabsorb? So, actually, that's the wrong thing. I was talking about bile reabsorption in the small intestine, right? So, normally 95% of the bile acids in your small intestine are reabsorbed in the last segment, the ileum, before passing on to your colon, right? When too many are left over, they pass into your large intestine with the rest of the waste. Now, this is not very efficient. Obviously, our body is not designed to cope with the massive amount of toxins that we've been putting into it after the Industrial Revolution, right? Because normally, your body would be able to stay fairly non-toxic, even reabsorbing 95% of the bile acid, right? But when you have to get rid of more stuff than you can get rid of, that's when you start to get sicker and sicker. You start to age quicker. You start to feel like crap whenever you try to do anything that's going to trigger a bile dump. And so, again, this is why soluble fiber is important, right? And Dr. Smith always stresses the importance of soluble fiber. And that's why Karen Hurd has such success with the bean protocol. Some people say, I can't eat beans, right? Some people don't tolerate beans well. So you can either try eating a very small quantity of beans. Like somebody who's like eating the carnivore diet, and after a while their healing doesn't really they get better, and a lot of things maybe it just stalls at some point. Maybe they just don't, they notice they're not feeling as well or something. So you can introduce 1 tablespoon of beans twice a day and see if that helps, So people that can't absorb beans or just don't want to eat beans, sorry, I said can't absorb. People who can't tolerate them, they can try to consume a very small amount, or you can try something like a fiber supplement, which, as you know, is very common for old people to take a fiber supplement. I don't think you should necessarily take huge amounts to become dependent on it, but it is certainly very helpful if you have health problems, right? It's a very natural thing that you can either eat beans, or if you find it for whatever reason hard to eat beans regularly, or you don't tolerate them well, you can use either psyllium husk or sun fiber. And honestly, if you're not real hardcore, sun fiber is better because sun fiber dissolves in water better, it tastes better, it's just easier. Psyllium husk has a bit of a more funny taste, it doesn't dissolve as well in water. Some people are like hardcore the thing is that there's been lots of studies done, and of course all the studies in soluble fiber show that if you take a soluble fiber supplement, or if your dietary fiber is increased in another way, like all health outcomes just get better. That's how important soluble fiber is. And also foods like, not just beans, but things like apples and bananas and barley and stuff like that contain good amounts of it. So the thing about psyllium husk versus sun fiber, once I was mentioning sun fiber to some guy who's like really into this, and he was like, sun fiber, he pretended to be confused for a second, even though I knew he knew what I was talking. And then he's like, oh, you mean hydrolyzed guar gum? It's like, well, yeah, if I wanted to say hydrolyzed guar gum every single time, I would say that. But they've kind of made this brand name for it. Instead of calling it hydrolyzed guar gum, they call it sun fiber. So, yeah, maybe it sounds like something horribly unnatural, but it's not. The body, it's simply soluble fiber. They basically took guar gum and turned it into just the soluble fiber component of it. And so he was like, oh, well, the long-term effects of psyllium husk are better. Like, sun fiber gives you the short to medium term good effects, and psyllium husk gives you more of the long term good effects. But it's such a small distinction. It's really much easier to use sun fiber. So that's another option to help. Basically, you're just helping remove more bile acids from your body, because they contain a lot of the toxins that are being expelled from your liver and your gallbladder. And so basically removing all that from your body. The more that you have accumulated in your liver, also the more weight that you're going to gain. And this brings me to weight gain, weight loss, another interesting topic that most people misunderstand. Right? I saw a guy recently post something, a very, well-intentioned but oversimplified misunderstanding of weight loss and weight gain. He said, you know what, you don't even need to do like a meme diet and do all this funny thing. It's really just as simple as calories in, calorie out. You just need to eat less and don't follow any meme diets, just do a bit of exercise, and that's how you're going to lose weight. The problem is it really isn't so simple. There are many people who eat less and just keep gaining. Again, calories in, calories out, it's not really how it works. There are people who eat massive amounts of calories and don't exercise much and don't gain weight. What's your explanation? Oh, they just have a fast metabolism. Okay. What's really behind it is your body is not so much gaining weight because of, it is loosely related to how much you're eating versus how much you're sitting around. And it is loosely related to the quality of the food you're eating, but it's more closely related to the amount of toxins in the food that you're eating and how much toxins you already have accumulated in your body. Because here's the thing, when your liver can't store any more of what it's trying to store in, because it does accumulate. A lot of people say the liver doesn't accumulate toxins. It does, right? That's a medical fact. It does accumulate, bioaccumulate toxins, right? But if it can only accumulate so much, and then where does it start to put it? If it can't excrete it fast enough because you're not eating enough fiber, or maybe you're just taking in way too many toxins, it's going to start putting it in fat cells. And if you don't have fat cells, you're going to start to make them, right? So somebody could be not eating very much and gaining weight because they're eating like fried foods or foods that have, artificial colorings, flavorings that need to be eliminated somehow. So I just stick them in the fat cells. Lots of, especially beta carotene and vitamin A, anything that's yellow, cheese. Most animal fats are high in vitamin A or retinoic acid. So even if it's not listed, it's in a different form. And so, if you look at the animal foods that ancient people consumed, it was mostly red meat, which is fairly lean. They didn't really know how to make lard and ghee and butter until more recently. So for, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, they wouldn't be drinking half a gallon of milk a day or whatever. They wouldn't have that high consumption of fat and that high consumption of vitamin A, which is why it's kind of suspicious, or sus, as the Zoomers would say, that the Weston A. Price Foundation is trying to push that across as a traditional diet. But anyways, so people that are consuming large amounts of toxins in their diet, regardless of the quantity of calories they're consuming, the liver is going to need to make more fat cells to store that in, and so the person is going to get fat. That's why a lot of people have great success losing weight fairly easily. I even know personally a number of people who have lost weight very easily following a diet that's low in vitamin A and copper, and a diet that's like higher in protein, lower in fat, and you don't have to avoid carbs, you just avoid refined sugar. And basically following the protocol that Dr. Smith it's not a protocol, it's a set of guidelines and principles, most of which I just listed, although it's more complicated than that, most of which I just listed, but not just him, also this was developed by Grant Generous, so you're also kind of doing what he's doing, just not as strict. And also Karen Hurd also kind of has her eye on the prize there with her Bean protocol, which also helped people. So people have had great luck with that, because what happens when you stop taking in large amounts of the most serious toxins, which actually vitamin A and copper are probably the two most damaging ones, the ones that are responsible for most of this, and then everything else like the glyphosate and all the food additives and all that, those just add insult to injury. But the main injury is being caused by retinol and copper. So once you reduce your consumption of those and you pay attention to your soluble fiber intake and hydration and things like that, and it can be helpful to take certain mineral supplements, but once you start paying attention to those basic things, all of a sudden, when your liver is pushing toxins into the gallbladder and then is pushing it into the small intestine, there's actually a soluble fiber that can absorb them and carry more of them out, so less is being reabsorbed. You're always going to reabsorb like 95% of it, but you want to get as much out as you can. So the soluble fiber is going to help with that. And now all of a sudden, the liver maybe actually get to the point where it can remove more than it's taking in. And now you don't need those fat cells anymore, so what's going to happen? They will be broken down, right? Now, when you lose a lot of weight really fast, I know somebody who's losing a lot of weight somewhat fast right now and breaking out in horrible acne. That can tend to happen because what's in those fat cells, a lot of toxins are stored in those fat cells. So funny things can happen, right? It doesn't mean that this person should stop losing weight because now they have acne. The acne is going to pass, right? It's just that there's so much, when you eat, processed food, crap food, whatever, your diet is based on tomato sauce and cheese, which it is for most of them. I've kind of figured that out. Most people's diet, I even know people that like claim to be into like traditional eating and healthy and Weston A. Price and all that, and still their diet is mostly seems to be based on tomato sauce and cheese, and like everything half their meals revolve around those two things. So anyways, when you stop doing that kind of thing, right, and start paying attention to some basic principles, then it's much easier for your body to get rid of fat cells and also toxins that are stored in your organs, and things to start to work better. And that's something that people tend to notice when they're following one of these For example, they're following the advice that Gary Smith gives in his courses, or that even the stricter protocol that Grant Genereux developed to reverse all his diseases, and or even just including more basic things like including more fiber in their diet and taking a zinc picolinate supplement or whatever, just a few basic things. A lot of random things start to improve that you didn't realize were going to improve. Like all of a sudden, you go from having like weird wet earwax that you have to clean out of your ear to not having earwax, and you don't even, just enough so that your ear stays lubricated, but you never actually have to stick a Q-tip in there because it doesn't build up like it used to. Because, hey, earwax is yet another way, a fatty substance that your body can put toxins into. So when you have yellow earwax, it's full of retinol, basically, and other toxins, right? And your body needs to make more earwax, so it has yet another place to put all this stuff that you're throwing into your body. Random things, right? Men have said that their voice starts to get deeper. Heat tolerance and cold tolerance get better. So when you start to have like a cold allergy, like your skin gets all itchy and dry and your joints get swollen and stuff when it's cold, right? That's a problem that tends to resolve itself. Feeling like crap in the heat. Well, hey, every time it gets hot, you trigger a bile dump in your body. The more toxic your bile is, the worse you're going to feel, among other things. So that's why one of the reasons why people report having more heat tolerance, right, when they start to detoxify their body. So when you're detoxing, you're not following the advice of these skinny, crazy hippies who are obviously malnourished and they're somehow trying to earn $60 an hour, duping poor people by doing health coaching. You're not following the advice of those people, right? You're following the basic biology of the body, learning how these systems work. I'm trying to see if there's any other interesting articles that I pulled up that are worth reading through. Probably not. I think I've covered it all. So just a brief overview of the things that I've mentioned, right? So the basic detoxification function of your body is performed. Most of your detoxification is performed by your liver and your kidneys, right? So they're both connected to a bladder, right? Your liver takes toxins out of the blood that came from your small intestine via your portal vein. It takes those toxins out and it puts most of them into the gallbladder, into the bile acids in the gallbladder, right? And the kidneys take toxins out of the blood and put them into it's just called your bladder, your urinary bladder, right? And the urinary, whenever you have to pee, you might feel like you have to pee, you have some control over that, and then you pee and the urine comes out, right? And the gallbladder, you don't have control over that, but you do have control over triggering it, right? So you could eat a meal that's really high in fat, and now you're going to dump a bunch of bile. You might not feel so good. Or you can eat and I know there's people that are going to reply below the video saying, I just ate 2 pounds of butter and I feel great. All right, cool. You know what? Good for you, right? And so you do have control over if you know that you feel like crap each time you exercise, you might want to try a lighter exercise or not doing in the high sun, so you're not dumping as much bile. You may not want, maybe it's convenient if you get biled up in the morning when you drink coffee, but it's also not that great to drink coffee. So something that a lot of people would struggle with. I've certainly been on and off of caffeine through the years, but I'm grateful that a lot of people struggle with things that are much worse than caffeine. So be grateful if the main addiction you're struggling with is caffeine, tomato sauce, and cheese. So you have some control over the triggers of bile dumps if you know what they are, right? But obviously you need to dump the bile because you need to get rid of it. So you also want to be consuming soluble fiber. So waking up in the middle of the night can sometimes happen because of bile dumps. If you all of a sudden you wake up and you just feel wired and you can't go back to sleep, it can be a mineral imbalance. So sometimes some potassium, like eating a banana, can help. But a lot of times it's caused by a bile dump, and now there's just and maybe you have cholestasis or subclinical cholestasis, so there's bile in your bloodstream now, and it's in your brain, and you're so wired, and you just lie there in bed for hours, and you can't go back to sleep again at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. You can try to eat something, drink some water, and eat something that has a bit of soluble fiber to attempt to absorb. Now that the water that you drink will dilute bile acids, will help to dilute them, and the soluble fiber that you eat, whether you eat an apple or a banana, or maybe you have something fibrous, beans or barley, or you just put a tablespoon or a teaspoon of sun fiber in a glass of water, swish it up, and drink it along with a quarter teaspoon of activated charcoal, which is also something that has, I'm surprised I haven't mentioned it yet, something that is extremely useful if you don't overdo it. So I'm going to search for the history of activated charcoal. The first documented use of activated charcoal goes as far back as 3750 BC, when it was first used by the Egyptians for smelting ores to create bronze. Well, okay, by 1500 BC, the Egyptians were also using it for intestinal ailments, absorbing unpleasant odors, and for writing on So 1500 BC is the first recorded use of it being used for health reasons. But it was probably used before that. That was just the first time they recorded it. Now, it's also written in the Bible. If we go to the book of Isaiah, let's see if I can find this. 6:13 in the, where's the, yeah, the Greek Old Testament. So, yeah, it says here, and there was sent to me one of the seraphs, and this is Isaiah 6, chapter 6, verse 6. And there was sent to me one of the seraphs, and he had in his hand a hole, which he had taken off the altar with the tongs. And he touched my mouth, and said, Behold, this has touched thy lips, and will take away thine iniquities, and will purge off thy sins. Now, this is a vision the guy is having. Do you think an angel tortured him by holding a fiery hot coal up to his lips and just scarring and permanently disfiguring his face, and then said, I will purge this? No, probably not. Although if you are an average atheism enjoyer, you might interpret the Bible that way. In my opinion, it's probably a sort of spiritual metaphor / reference to the use of activated charcoal, which is a coal, to how do I say this? Absorb toxins from the body, right? And it says like taking away thine iniquities and purging off thy sins. And there is obviously a connection between physical health and mental and spiritual health. If you're really unhealthy and gluttonous, it's going to be a bit harder to resist spiritual temptation. So that's all kind of connected. That's kind of how I see that verse. I don't think my interpretation is particularly blasphemous. I think I'm kind of in the right zone with that. And we do know that around the time, when was the book of Isaiah? This is oral tradition, so you can't really write when was it written, but I can write when it originated from. Sometime during the ministry of Isaiah, approximately 740 to 701 BC. So that was 700 years after the first recorded instance in Egypt of using activated charcoal as a remedy. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but sometimes if you call the poison control center and say you've been poisoned, depending on what poison you took and how long ago it was, one thing they might tell you to do is to take activated charcoal. Why? Because it's really good at absorbing toxins, right? Let's see. Let me search activated charcoal for poisoning. Let's see what comes up. And vets use it, you know. First thing that comes up is Poison Control Center's number, which is pretty smart of the search engine, right? Yeah, here it says in the Mayo Clinic, which is a very authoritative mainstream pharmakeia source, right? Shout out to that guy who accused me of being pharmakeia in one of my last videos, right? So yes, here you have it. It's proof that I am pharmakeia. I embody pharmakeia. It says activated charcoal is used in the emergency treatment of certain kinds of poisoning. It helps prevent the poison from being absorbed from the stomach into the... Yeah, so it absorbs the poison so that it can't... And the body has a problem absorbing things back out from the activated charcoal. Now, when people often say that it can cause deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies, by taking it regularly. I would say you shouldn't take it every day for the rest of your life. But also, as far as I know, they've probably done studies on this. I haven't seen any studies showing activated charcoal consumption to cause nutrient deficiencies. For whatever reason, it doesn't do that. People theorize that it does, but it doesn't. Yeah, and then there's a whole bunch of results, all official medical websites, the National Institutes of Health, all talking about activated charcoal being used for poisoning. So hey, if activated charcoal is not just used in biblical times to treat intestinal ailments and purge the body of its sins, right? But also in modern times accepted by mainstream medicine to use for poisoning. And if what you're doing every single time you eat your standard American diet of tomato sauce and cheese is poisoning yourself, well, hey, right? So if you are experiencing a bile dump in the middle of the night, you won't know that's what it is, but if you wake up in the middle of the night with a wired brain, you just can't sleep again, and you just lie there for 3 hours, there's a good chance. The two possibilities I would say are you don't have enough potassium or some kind of mineral imbalance, or a bile dump. And so fiber will help absorb the bile, but charcoal will help even faster and better. You just can't overdo the charcoal, because charcoal causes constipation. And I've noticed if you overdo charcoal within a few days or within a week of overdoing it, you start to get like gas or weird cramping or it's just, you got to go easy with the charcoal, but it's really powerful. So what I might do, if I had that issue, I might get up, I might put one little scoop or a tablespoon of sun fiber and 1/4 of a teaspoon of activated charcoal. Hardwood activated charcoal, not coconut. Very important. Hardwood activated charcoal. The coconut has mold toxins in it, supposedly, right? So anyways, you mix those two things together and you drink it, and it's great. The activated charcoal doesn't really have any flavor. The sun fiber is a little bit, sun fibery, but anyways, that's it. And that's it. And there's a good chance that you'll feel a little bit better. Maybe not enough to go back to sleep right away, but that's a good catch-all for anything involving bile. So activated charcoal is also going to help absorb bile, but it's not going to help it it's not going to help transport it out of the body, right? Activated charcoal, if you take too much of it, it can constipate you. So that's why the fiber is a good combination, right? It's a very good combination. You have to experiment with the amounts. You might tolerate even less activated charcoal. You might be able to take even more without problems, right? But I think if you take like a half a tablespoon a day or a tablespoon a day of activated charcoal, within a week, some people might start to have some issues. So too much of a good thing, So the soluble fiber absorbs bile acid and transports it through the intestine, right? The charcoal just absorbs it. It's not so good at the transportation. Fiber is really good at that, soluble fiber. So that's why, yeah, great combination. And activated charcoal and soluble fiber are two really powerful things. And there's a third thing. It's a weak oxidizer. There's 3 letters usually used to describe it. Anytime I mention it in a YouTube video, the YouTube video usually gets deleted for medical misinformation. So there's people that don't want you to know about the third thing, which is good at oxidizing pathogens and toxins in the bloodstream acutely. And it's good, for parasites and stuff. It's something that you also don't want to overdo. You want to use once in a while. But I can't really talk about it. Because like I said, if I want this video to get deleted within a month, then I'll talk about it, but I don't want that to happen. So I may post a video, maybe in the future I'll talk about just that third substance, and I'll post it in my Telegram channel. But I consider those 3 things, hardwood activated charcoal, soluble fiber, and the third thing that I can't talk about, I consider those to be the 3 most important things for treating a cold or a flu or intestinal issues, as long as you know how to use them. You could also use them topically, which too much to talk about this in this video. Maybe I'll make a video talking about all 3 of those things, how you can use them together, and post it just on the Telegram channel and pin it, so that way anyone who's watching this YouTube video who wants to go see it can do it. But I haven't done that yet. And also, if you're easily offended, then don't go to my Telegram channel, because not only do I post things that might be a little bit edgy sometimes, I sometimes share things from channels on Telegram that if you click on the channel name and you go to that channel, you might be really offended at some of the things that you see there. It doesn't mean I condone everything that's on other channels. It's just I see something that's good and I share it. There may also sometimes even the name of the channel might be offensive. For example, recently I shared things from a channel that was like an Eastern European meme posting channel, right? And there's a lot of hilarious memes there, and some mildly offensive memes, mostly for like Serbians and other Slav type Eastern Europeans. And the title of the channel is just like horrific racial slurs in there, but that was funny to them because the Slavic people have a very crude sense of humor sometimes. So, anyways, that's all. Talked enough so far. I already did a brief overview and conclusion, but a quick conclusion again: you're eating too much tomato sauce and cheese and other things. You're eating too much vitamin A and copper. Those names that I mentioned out, Anthony Mawson published a lot of studies on this. Karen Hurd found out that beans were good. Grant Jenneru found out that not eating lots of vitamin A and copper and eating the strict diet that he discovered reversed him from dying, basically. And Garrett Smith developed that a lot more and made it into a system that everyday people can incorporate into their diet. Soluble fiber is really important, whether you're getting it from beans, apples, barley, oats, or an actual soluble fiber powder supplement, which can also be useful medicinally to treat some issue you might be having, along with hardwood activated charcoal. And the third thing that I cannot talk about, or else my video will be deleted by YouTube. Check out the links below the video. I'll see what I can put down there for you guys. Have a nice day.